And a very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel and to all of our viewers, not only in Australia, but all over the world. And gentlemen and lady, a lot happening in sport. We might go to you straight away, Coutta, because you can wrap up the Australian Open on what was a huge final day.
Well, was it Sunday or Monday that it actually finished the tournament? It went for more than 14 days, I think. So
a huge final 2 days.
Yeah, at the end of it, you got to say that the Australian Open was a huge success, and the two winners were certainly very worthy winners. Last week, obviously, we covered off on Ash's win, and that was certainly the highlight of the tournament to that time. And I think from a nation, it's what we needed. But Sunday evening, we obviously had the men's final with Medvedev versus Nadal. Now, I was looking okay. 2 sets to love. Medvedev travelling pretty well. Break points in the third set. I thought even if he loses this, he's still got the match sort of on his racket. Unfortunately, what we failed to take into account was Nadal's mentality. He was brutal from that point on. And obviously it was 5 sets that Nadal was successful in, which means that he's now the most successful Grand Slam tournament winner. We're not going to use the term Grand Slam because that refers to something else, but he's won the most Grand Slam tournaments of 21 now.
Could you just, Coutta, perhaps, without putting a psychologist cap on, Djokovic is almost like Shakespearean to me, that he just craves people's love and admiration. Medvedev's more sort of a surly brat type. Like, does he genuinely want to be loved, or he just wants to let us know that you don't love me, I don't give an F?
He's a bit of crazy Ivan, isn't he? He sort of has his moments in the sun. So at parts of the tournament, he's happy to play the villain. And the other night, he was always going to be the villain. Now, at 2 sets to love up, he was just dominating Nadal. His serve was really, really strong. But then he could sort of start seeing a few little chinks, and he sort of had a crack at the crowd and with the umpire. And Nadal, as we know, Nadal has his rituals, or whatever you want to call them. And he does take the maximum time. But I don't know with Medvedev what he wants to be. And then after the tournament, obviously, he came out and sort of talked about the crowd and how it's not what he wants to be. And if there was another tournament on in his country when the Grand Slam at the French Open or one of the others is on, he might actually play that instead. Now, I think it was said in the heat of the battle, but he's great for tennis. He plays tennis like no one else does. If you watch the coverage, they started showing where he stands. I think if there wasn't a back fence, he might stand further back.
He was almost up the road at Swan Street, one of the serves.
He wouldn't get away with it in local tennis. He would be standing on the court behind him, and he'd have two fences in the way.
He's got a wingspan like a pterodactyl, and he's built like a 2-iron with ears. I tell you,
But it's an amazing game style. So he served on the night, and this is how good a match it was, that he served 23 aces and 5 double faults. He had 76 winners, 52 unforced errors. Now, if you look across at Nadal and you look at stats, as we do on this show, is that Nadal only had 3 aces. He served 5 double faults. He had 69 winners and 68 unforced errors. Now, going on that, you would think that Medvedev has won in straight or easily. Now, what that shows is the amount of pressure that Nadal put on Medvedev. And I haven't got the forced errors, but I think the forced errors for Medvedev would have been quite high. The only stat really that sticks out from the actual night is the break points. Now, they both had 22 break points, which is a lot. And Medvedev won 6 and Nadal won 7, which obviously was the deciding break in the last set at 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. But it all started to turn around in that third set. Like, the third set was gripping viewing. unfortunately for me, I couldn't stay up after that third set, or else I would have needed a coffee injection or a drip for the first hour of Monday morning. But the third set, Nadal played some of the best tennis I think he's probably played in a long time. He served well, he returned well, and he put the pressure back onto Medvedev. So they both had 3 break points, and Nadal obviously took one of those opportunities and turned the third set, and all of a sudden it was 2-1. I don't think anyone could see, Professor, what was coming up over the next 2 hours. The match went for over 5 hours, obviously. And at the end of the day, I think we've got a very worthy champion. And I hope that Medvedev does decide to come back to Australia, because I think he adds a lot to the tournament.
Can you imagine being Medvedev when Nadal's coming at you? You would feel a bit like a bull with a matador. You know it's not going to end well. It'd just be very hard to repel someone with that much tenacity.
Yeah, I think, like, obviously you compare the two finals, Ash on the night before and the men's final, and there were some similarities between them. And I think you look at it and you start thinking about the serving of the players, and I think that the serve was the biggest difference with Ash on the Saturday night. With Nadal and Medvedev, like those stats for, like, Nadal's not a person that doesn't get balls back, and yet here Medvedev is serving aces past him, whereas Nadal puts so much pressure on you to make balls. He gets the ball back. Gelding.
I'm going to say, after the negativity of the early with Djokovic and the deportation, I love the Federer, my favourite message to him, saying a year ago we were on crutches. What exactly was Nadal's injury? Because it was a miraculous comeback.
Yeah, I think it was the foot injury that has been talked about previously with other athletes. So obviously he was on crutches 6 weeks or 6 months before it, played minimal lead-up tournaments into it, and at the end of the day, you look back at his tournament and he played, I've got it here somewhere floating around, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so he played 5-set matches, played a couple of 5-set matches. He also played a 4-setter as well, and was on court for longer than what Medvedev was. So I think everyone was looking at that and thinking, well, can Nadal back up after the semi-final against Berrettini? Well, to beat Berrettini took a lot of effort, because the match before he played Shapovalov, who was in a 5-set match as well. So Nadal had probably a lot stacked against him, but there were signs, I think, during the tournament that the foot was a little bit troublesome, but in the final you wouldn't have even known that he had a foot issue.
Gelding?
Oh, good on you, Mark. Good to have the giraffe back, David, when you call for a Gelding question and the giraffe just butts in. But obviously, that's all right, giraffe. We're happy to wait for you. But Dave, I suppose the question I have for you, and going back to the Barty and Nadal story, if the rules are 3 sets, Medvedev wins. Like Barty won the first 2 sets. So what do you think? Going back onto that, here we had Saturday night was an hour and a half. Then we have Sunday that is basically a 5-hour game and a different set of rules for the same prize money. And we would have had a different winner.
I'd go back and check all the stats around if we gone to 3 sets, who would have won previous Grand Slams. But from a spectacle point, I think the 5-set marathon was gripping drama, gripping TV, and great for the sport. I would have thought Medvedev wins in straight. Great tennis, but then the story is Nadal comeback. So we talk about it often on this show about the 5 sets versus 3 sets. I think it's going to be something that we always talk about, why there's 5 sets at the Grand Slams and not 3. But I think for me personally, and I've spoken about before, is I love the 5 sets in Grand Slam. I just think it creates drama. it's at the end of the day, the best athletes can play the 5 sets. Kyrgios obviously isn't the best athlete, loves the 3 sets. You look at the doubles results, him and Kokkinakis, they obviously won in 3. But yeah, for me, I think that 5 sets is still the way to go for the Grand Slams. Make it different for the Grand Slam tournaments.
Could the women's be different? Should the women's be 5 sets then?
No, I don't think there needs to be the same. Well, I don't think there needs to be the same comparison. Why do they have to be the same? Why do they need to be? Because they're getting paid the same. Is that the justification?
I don't know. Well, if you're having I don't know what the different rules are. To me, it's just common sense. If you're going to have if you're going to make the Grand Slams different for the men, why not make the Grand Slams different for the women?
So history would say that the men's has always been 5 sets prior to tournaments being 3 sets. So men's has been 5, women's has never been 5. That's always been 3.
Well,
so,
Coutta, I was going to say, just on Gelding's point, isn't the women's best of 3 because historically, and I catch this next phrase very carefully, saying historically, it was believed that women couldn't play 5 sets.
I'm not sure of that. I believe it's you've probably read that somewhere, so that could be the case. Going forward, though, I still don't you watch the number of women's matches and the defaults and the stress that's put on their bodies. Would they be able to play 5? And honestly, would they be able to play 5 sets? Sarah?
I think it was originally that there were only 3 sets because it wasn't believed that women's bodies could handle it. I remember looking into it because I think we discussed it during the Australian Open last year. And personally, I was of the belief that a lot of people have spoken about bringing the women's up to 5 sets. They're being paid the same, all that sort of stuff. And I loved watching. I didn't watch all 5 hours of the men's final. I didn't have that sort of attention span. But I'm almost of the belief that if we were going to bring them to be equal, it would be more engaging for fans to bring the men's down to 3 because of how short attention spans are these days as well, especially when it comes to sport, because as much as people might be watching it on their screen, usually they'll have another screen near them or a screen and a half on their phone, looking at stats, engaging in the game in other way. You never know how the game's going to go. And I mean, I don't know how Medvedev would have gone through all 5 sets if he didn't have his pickle juice, getting him through the whole game. But yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting conversation that'll keep coming up over the next few years as well.
The question, Gelding, might be best posed to Craig Tiley. He's a groundbreaker when it comes to sport. So maybe we can get Craig to end of the occasion. But for me, I still sit there and I think that the 5 sets for the men's is history says it is. Gets Sarah's point about the attention spans now of the younger generation that we seem to be but catering for their eyeballs. And whether it'd be interesting to see that the stats or the ratings, because I think that would be more of a telling than those people that are actually there at the final. The Grand Slam finals, I think, start at over $500 a person. It's a wanker sort of fest who's there and who wants to be seen there. I think I saw Shane Warne and some of the other sort of celebrities on our A list that were there. But is there a way to be able to say, like we saw the ratings for the Barty match on the Saturday evening were the highest, I think, since Leighton Hewitt played, I think it was, over 4 million, which is amazing. But then you go the next night, and what were the ratings for that? What did they start at, and how did they end? And obviously time zones and all that sort of stuff. But I think if we go to 3, what are we losing? Are we losing the history of it, or is it just that we're moving with the times? Tennis is adapting. And if that's the case, if that's the case, if that is the case,
no.
Let's buy into it.
David, and I'm quite happy either way, to keep, and the tradition is a certain thing. And you go back to the Wimbledons of Borg and McEnroe and things like that for the 5 sets, the thrill of it all and things like that. I just find it interesting that worldwide, and tennis has taken over like every week, they're all 3 sets, everything except the majors, which have the history in it, I suppose. So neither way, it was just a question for you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be and I think it's going to be a debate that goes forward for some time until there's sort of this clarification or there is a definitive answer to it, Gelding, because it is a question that comes up every year. Every year it's always raised, and it's starting to get raised more and more. So as we get this next generation of player coming through, your Zverevs and your the guys coming through, Shapovalov and all these younger guys, are they going to be able to play that 5-set standard? And do we want them playing 5 sets if it means that they're going to have a cooked body at the end of their careers?
I suppose the question, where will the majors be in 10 years when this group, Federer's already going, Nadal's at the end, that foot would be, Djokovic is probably, 33, 34?
I think they're all nearly the same age, Gelding.
Yeah. So, in 5 years, they're going to pass on and the torch is going to be passed to a group of players that traditionally play tennis over 3 sets, not 5, apart from the 4 majors.
So the majors or the Grand Slam tournaments are still the ones that most people want to win.
Yeah.
So it's not like the golf where they can, this week there's the Saudi Arabian tournament or whatever it is over there. That means that the Pebble Beach, which has always been one of those tournaments that everyone wants to win, the top players aren't necessarily there. Mm-hmm. So they've gone chasing the money. So is it a matter going forward that someone goes, you know what, I'm going to start a Rebel tournament at the same time because Australia is so far away. Let's get everyone to play. If it's another Grand Slam in the Northern Hemisphere, so if it's in Europe, even though it's winter, or it's in Saudi Arabia or whatever it is, that might be a catalyst for tennis to look at itself and go, right, we know that the tennis in Australia in 40-degree heat is not conducive to players for the rest of the season, or it takes some weeks to get better. So tennis has to evolve itself anyway. We talked about last week, is that tennis has this eyeballs in tennis run us for the last month. So the ATP Cup, Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne. What needs to happen is that people need to translate that into people playing tennis on a Saturday, whether that's juniors in a Saturday morning or seniors in a Saturday afternoon. The numbers at grassroots for Australia have to increase. Now, if that means that Grand Slams change, so be it. But we need to be able to convert people to play tennis more and more. And from an Australian perspective, we need to have champions again. We've got Ash Barty in the women's. There's not much below her. In the men's, we've got Demonar, who's probably a top 20 to 30 player. Outside of them, there's not a lot. So for us as a nation, I think tennis is in a space at the moment where it doesn't know its own identity. The Davis Cup is pulled. I know you're going to talk about the Davis Cup, but the Davis Cup is not what it used to be. Does anyone care about the Davis Cup?
Can we mention on that Kyrgios being snubbed?
I don't think Kyrgios has been snubbed. I don't think he was in the team. He wasn't selected. I don't think he's been snubbed. And people saying that is that he was never going to play doubles.
Didn't he elect not to play?
I just don't think he was selected based on. But is he in our best 3 singles players?
He's got to be there. If you want bums on seats, he's got to be there. I don't care. Just get one of the nip-nups we've never heard of out and get him in.
But he won't. but bums on seats for Davis Cup, they'll sell no matter what, though, Paul. So it's not like he will whip the crowd into a frenzy and all that sort of rubbish, but people will still go watch the Davis Cup because they do. It's that generation that have grown up with the Davis Cup that will continue to go and watch Davis Cup. But going forward, though, once that generation's done, what happens? Davis Cup's cooked in my mind. I think it's finished.
You can bring it back. If he's not there on form, my name's Pat Rafter.
Yeah.
So,
David, are they? Oh, sorry,
go on,
mate.
Go on, Gelding.
David, is things like the Davis Cup, should they be set for places like Kooyong, where the tennis lover plays and
yeah.
You know.
Well, this one's obviously being played at in Sydney at Ken Rosewall Arena, which I think from memory is out at Homebush, which is, if anyone's ever been to Homebush, it's a concrete garden out there. It's a bit of a tip of a place. I don't, and it won't be played on grass. I think going, and this is a conversation for down the track. It's like the AFL and the AFLW, right? Is that last night we had a match in Maroochydore where the crowd was big, or it seemed to be big, even though you struggled to hear it over the wind tunnel that was Maroochydore. You look at Casey's the same, good crowd last night, wind tunnel. Do you remember, and it's infamous, but when we played on the grass courts at Mildura, big crowd, no opposition crowd, so it was like it was an Australian home tie like the old days.
Yeah.
Why can't we represent that and go, right, let's go and play this in somewhere that tennis may not be their first sport, or I don't know, just because people will go and watch it. They'll travel there. They'll get to the community. So if you said somewhere like Toowoomba or, I don't know, somewhere they've got grass court, not Parramatta. Not Parramatta.
Oh, well, the NRL charity shield, they're playing in Mudgee, fine town. You can take it there, somewhere like that.
But the only reason I said Kooyong for that is because, basically for Melbourne, you would call Kooyong the biggest kind of local tennis club going around. It sits a couple of thousand, so you get atmosphere, without, 2,000 in Melbourne Park would look, very, very smart. But there you would get atmosphere at Kooyong, and you may get a bit of, and they're people that follow tennis, play tennis, want to be involved.
It's it's probably deemed the spiritual home of tennis in Australia, Kooyong. And unfortunately, Gelding, what would have to happen is either they played on whatever the surface is, rebound days, plexi pavement they've got on centre court at Kooyong, or they'd bring the grass in like they did at Melbourne Park from Seymour. But I just think that why not get country? Why not? I don't know. Like, I think that would be amazing for tennis in Australia, rather than playing at Sydney.
Parking's hard at Kooyong for all the Range Rovers, and the Porsche. It's hard to fit them all in there.
Please, Paul.
All
please.
Right,
I'm no longer a member there. So, but obviously for us with the Davis Cup, Professor, just final sign off is that we will win the tie. We could probably get probably the 100th player ranked in the world to play. We're playing against the team that their highest ranked player is. I've got to be careful of this because it does sound a little bit Fuchsovic, his name is, who's ranked 39 in the world for singles. Then the rest of them are ranked 282, 359, 243, and 563 in the world in singles. I then look at their doubles rankings and they're 291, 460, 765. So we will win the tie with the team that's been selected, which then qualifies us obviously for the end of year in Abu Dhabi, I think it is, isn't it, or one of the sand states. And then I would hope, and Paul, this might be the bigger goal, is that Nick Kyrgios plays some tournaments during the year, has some good performances, pulls his head in maybe a little bit, and we get him to play Davis Cup for Australia. Him, Kokonakis, Demonar, Peers and Saville. And that group of five would be a pretty handy Davis Cup team going forward.
All right, Coutta, two last questions to finish off tennis for today. Now, you've played many matches of tennis. When was the last time you went for the pickle juice?
You've got to run to have pickle juice, I think, Professor. So that might be an indication of the fitness levels. Never have. And I know our warm-ups involve something different than what I saw Nadal and Medvedev doing. It used to be 12:15 at the pub for a schooner, and you would then play. But no, certainly no pickle juice.
I think you might be having longer toilet breaks than Medvedev if you're on too much pickle juice.
They're not big though. Do they make you do something? Do they?
Oh, they give you the runs more than Carl Lewis, I reckon.
All right. The second one, Coutta, is when is the prize money for the wheelchair tennis players going to increase? If we look at the first round losses in the main draw, able-bodied tennis players are paid $103,000 for losing in the first round. The winner of the wheelchair Australian Open wins $69,057, which is $34,000 less than what a first round able-bodied loser gets. It just doesn't seem to make sense.
When you said that through this morning, I was genuinely surprised at that, Professor. There's just no correlation at all between the prize money. People will say that there's only 5 players or whatever it was competing in the quads that Dylan Alcott competed in. I'm genuinely surprised at that. Is it? Well, technically, it's reimbursement for costs at the end of that. Why don't they call it that? It's not prize money, is it?
No,
it's reimbursement of expenses. Is probably similar. So you look at Dylan Alcott and his team, and then you start looking down at Heath Davison and the Dutch guys, and all of a sudden you're starting to see a sport that's growing. So you hope that in the future the prize money would go similar to that. Obviously, we've talked about female prize money and the matching of it. A great initiative from the Australian Open and the Grand Slams. But yeah, obviously there's a way to go when it comes to the disabled athletes and who, Professor, let's be honest, we've got to watch a hell of a lot of over the last 12. Gee, Gelding, you've got a fair cough on you there, man. That's 12 to 24 months that we've been able to watch Alcott, but also the Paralympics, and we'll get to watch the Winter Paralympics as well, which again highlights these amazing athletes.
Well, it's an interesting point you make there, Coutta, because Australia is quite happy to trumpet winners. When Dylan Alcott's winning, he's our boy. When the Paralympians are winning, they're doing a great job too. Just doesn't seem to stack up when we want to reward people for doing that.
And I think maybe, Professors, is the thing across the board is that it's assessed as its own sport, not part of tennis. And that might be the issue that we're looking at here. So if you look across the board at other professional sports, tennis is obviously one of the more high profile. The tennis that we're talking about with Alcott and Heath Davison and Andy Lapthorne from they're not as well known. Or sorry, I shouldn't say they're not as well known, but they're making a profile for this particular sport going forward. So you would expect to see prize money increase. You would expect the exposure of these athletes to continue to increase. And as I think the CEO of the Paralympics the other week said, Professor, the actual Australian Open and the access that they provide is unparalleled. And maybe that's another concern, is that what we do in Australia isn't replicated overseas either.
All right. Thanks for that review of the Australian Open, Coutta. We really appreciate it. Going to you now, Paul. The NRL season just around the corner. Charity Shield in 3 weeks' time, but the All-Stars next week. So that season's going to be on us very quickly.
Yeah, always taken quite seriously, that match. It's not a Mickey Mouse type arrangement. Dare I say it, like the AFL with the State of Origin when they tried that a few years back. It is a match that's taken seriously. There's a lot of pride in each jersey with the Indigenous and the Maori teams. 3 times they've played, it's 1-1. Last year was 10-10 draw. So what I'm looking forward to most seeing is ex-Storm player Nico Hines, who's gone from the fullback role to a playmaking role at the Sharks, and that's the role he will be playing for the Indigenous All-Stars. They're $1.42 with the bookies as Gelding suddenly takes note. I think the Maori are value at nearly $3. We've all seen them do the haka. It's not something I'd want to face. They bring that passion to the field. There'll be a big chance, the Maori team. That's on the 12th, so next Saturday night. And then the next big game, as I said earlier, is at Mudgee. It's good that they're taking it to the streets, and that's the Charity Shield, the Dragons and the Rabbitohs annual match, which is also not a Mickey Mouse type setup. That's a pretty willing encounter. So round 1, though, 10th of March. So that'll come round before we know it, Professor.
Now, Paul, I see the women's season's also starting a little bit later, but 5 rounds of a women's season being played around the same time as the men's. So the NRL going down a different pathway to the AFL.
It is good, and I think that people's interest are in the women's side of the game as well as the men's side of the game at the same time, whereas the AFL, rightly or wrongly, has isolated the women's game and not running it in conjunction with the men's. Whether they think that it'll take away from it, I don't know. That's for the AFL to decide, but I think footy seasons should be run together. Another big news, it keeps burning along, is Wayne Bennett there at the Dolphins. I think the average age of his signing is about just slightly lower than the average age at your local RSL bingo night. So he keeps adding these Dad's Army players. He's going to have to land a marquee signing pretty soon, or they may be in some trouble. No, he's added both Bromwich brothers from the Storm. Jesse wouldn't have had too long to go, but they are very annoyed there at the Storm about Kenny Bromwich going. He joins Kafusi, so half the pack are going to be Storm players, along with Mark Nichols from the Rabbitohs, who you wouldn't get much change out of $40 from. So, he's certainly going in the veteran category, if you call it. Be good if it's a wine shop, but he's trying to create a rugby league team, so we'll see how they go.
Now, Paul, Tom Trebojevic in the news, just like yourself, going alcohol-free again in 2022, going to try and emulate his 2021 season.
Well, I remember last year, he about this time, he was seen running along Manly's Corso with a fan and did a muscle in the process. So I don't think that'll be happening on the San Pellegrinos this year, Professor. So that's a good thing for Manly, and they've got a big year coming up. They kicked the season off, Manly, if you don't mind. So that's going to be a massive start to the season. So my word, if that was slowing him down, he's proof of alien life on earth, Tom Trebojevic, the way he talks, looks, runs. So I'd be very nervous if I'm up against Manly. They could be a dark horse to win it all without giving too much away, Professor, with my predictions.
Some bad news across the ditch with respect to New Zealand Rugby League. The Warriors may not have any home games again.
Yes, and they've been battlers for years now with COVID. They've set themselves up here. They might even be saying ditch now, not across the ditch, given how much time they've spent here. So let's see. But everything's still excellent over there, I'd say. They've still got a pretty good team.
And what about your Rabbitohs?
Well, of course, Wayne Bennett gone, but the team remains, and Jason Demetrio, the coach, no relation to the former dictator of the AFL. He has been under Wayne Bennett for 5 years. The players are raving about him. I think he's done a perfect transition, unlike the transition we'll talk about with the Australian cricket coach shortly, I'm sure.
Any thoughts on replacing one of their better players?
At the Rabbitohs?
Yes.
Oh, we'll be okay this year. I think
one of the stars that you loved.
The which one?
One of the stars that you loved left after last year's grand final.
Who's that, sir?
Well, he went to the Brisbane Broncos, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, I'm trying not to talk about him. I was going to bring him up in terms of the short-term deal that was offered to Langer. When you've got Napoleon running your army, you don't have him on a battle-by-battle contract waiting for the next general to arrive. That's my views in advance. And that was my thoughts on Adam Reynolds. He was treated with disrespect, which, if you want that as a segue into the Australian cricket coach, we can use that.
Oh, no, we might save that one just for a couple of minutes, because Sarah's going to give us some AFLW because that's in season at the moment. And then we might go to cricket. But
how
Sarah,
about those Mets, literally, with your hat on? Anyway, that's
exactly right. Sarah, during the week, Scott Gowans, the former North Melbourne coach, former Collingwood assistant coach, appointed the Sydney Swans AFLW coach in their inaugural season next year. Dare we say, yet another senior coaching spot gone to a man. Look, he's got the credentials, obviously, 79% win rate when he was at North Melbourne, but it must be disappointing that once again women are passed over for the top job.
It definitely is. And we know that the AFL as an organisation is planning and hoping to have this as a change in the next 10 years. And it's not something I think any fans could have sat down and thought was going to happen immediately. We have to have the younger generations come through and get trained up, and the current women that we have playing the sport now that are motivated and really want to play will be the next generation of coaches. So I think that it's great to see that Sydney's making these signings, and the hype behind the women's football team is really growing in Sydney as well with the Swans. But it's disappointing, I guess, to see the progress isn't there yet, but hopeful to see that the AFL does have goals and plans in place in regards to the AFLW and employing women in those coaching and assistant coaching, admin, all sorts of roles.
Just while we're on Sydney, they made an announcement during the week that they've already got 4,000 AFLW members. That's not bad when you consider they haven't even played yet and won't play until 2023.
Pretty much. It'd be interesting to see how they went comparatively to Hawthorn, Port Adelaide and Essendon, because they're all, again, three clubs with massive followings in their own right. And I think it'll be really good that they've already got this momentum behind them going into the next season. There's going to be a lot of swapping around and trades and some sneaky deals done between clubs that there's already whispers about here and there, whether there's going to be certain players that are already playing for clubs poached to clubs from their hometowns if they want to move back to Adelaide or back to Melbourne, vice versa. And there's sort of already those whispers starting. The membership numbers behind it could be motivation for those kind of decisions, but it could also just be some really loyal Sydney fans that are ready to get behind the girls.
All right, Sarah. Now, AFLW reigning best and fairest Kiara Bowers, 2-match suspension for a hit off the ball. She was about 30 or 40 metres. I was watching it the other night and I thought, oh, that's going to be trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So she won't be going back to back for the best and fairest in the AFLW. Be a big loss for Fremantle.
Definitely. And disappointing to see that, I guess, both of our reigning best and fairest medalists for the league won't be able to win it again this year after Brianna Davey went down with an ACL in round 1 for Collingwood. But seems to be a little bit of a pattern now as well, because the year before, after Maddie Pressbarkis won it, she then also was banned from a match for rough conduct, so she wasn't able to win it last season. But yeah, disappointing to see that kind of behaviour, very out of character for her. She's built very strong, and she's a very strong and talented female, just ready to go and have a crack at the sport. But yeah, I guess disappointing to see, but we've seen a little bit more of that sort of rough contact in the last couple of games than we have, or that I can remember in the last couple of seasons, especially in round 1. There was a few moments where it seemed like the footballers were prioritising that sort of movement and the mind games behind the ball a lot more than they have been previously.
Well, I saw that there are a number of tackles so far in this round of AFLW that have already come under scrutiny, 2 in particular, and I see the AFL has decided that the tackles were within the rules of the game. Let me tell you, they were very close to not being within the rules of the game.
Definitely. And it comes down to as well, a lot of these athletes, as much as they are amazing athletes, might not have been trained in the same way that we have seen our men's footballers trained. They might not have played Auskick since they were 4 or 5. They haven't had the tackling training that might be permanently cemented in their playing style. Or it could just be the occasional mess ups that we see across the board in every single sporting code from every single athlete. Sometimes you just get a little bit too in your head, or you get a bit too out of your head and too in the game, and you sort of forget that there's rules and etiquette and safety that we really have to consider, especially in a game as rough as AFL.
Okay, so here's my beef for this week on the AFLW, and we couldn't probably go past a week where I don't have a beef. I went to the AFLW website today to check on the AFLW ladder because it would be of interest to people who we're talking to on this program.
Yes.
The AFLW ladder has not been updated for this round as yet. It still shows the ladder as it was before the round started. That would never happen in the AFL. It doesn't happen in the NRL. Any major league should be updating their ladder as soon as matches are concluded. It just says to me that the AFL still isn't taking this seriously.
No, and to be completely honest, I didn't even notice that it hadn't been updated when I checked it, not this morning, but yesterday. Yeah, very disappointing if that's the case. It's something that I think wouldn't even be that hard to update automatically if you're popping scores out there, and percentages are automatically calculated in the machines and laptops and calculators that we have at the moment. So disappointing to see that that hasn't actually been updated as of yet.
Yeah, hopefully the AFL can take that on board. Maybe the AFLW CEO could take that on board.
Exactly. And I mean, last time I was checking the ladder, I did notice that you had tipped the Gold Coast to do quite well earlier in the year, and they're in good form. They are in very good form. They weren't able to come away from a win against Melbourne. They're a very tough team to beat, but in great form for the year. It seems like there's been those bottom tier teams that haven't really been able to find their spot yet. The Geelongs, the Gold Coast, the Saints every once in a while as well. They're forming a bit more of that team culture, I think, and that's really pushing them to actually succeed on and off the field.
All right, now let's look at today's matches, 3 in all, and for Mr. Dalligan and the Gelding parlay bettors who'll be very much interested in your tips.
Not fed fast for punting.
Western Oval today at 1:10 p.m. Bulldogs are playing Richmond. Who'll win that one and why, Sarah?
I'm going to have to tip the Bulldogs. The Richmond girls have been... It's all right. The Richmond girls have been in great form, but the Bulldogs are they're classic. And I think it's something that I enjoy watching the Bulldogs play, and it's always amazing to see how they end up going. But I think that it will end up with a good win from the Bulldogs.
I'm off now, just up the road to go and watch it. Cheers, sir.
Now, for the Professor's parlay, this next match is a very important one, and the Gelding and I are very interested in your thoughts on this one. Carlton playing the Crows at 3:10 p.m. at Princes Park.
Oh, it's a big one, and it's interesting because they're 2 clubs that have been there since day dot and strong clubs, but I feel Carlton just hasn't been in the right form so far this year. They've had a few ups and downs, and even on the AFLW website, they were talking about Carlton's slump and what happens to be going on there. But I think Adelaide will be able to come away with a win.
Oh.
Well done, Sarah.
You happy about that, Gelding?
Oh, that's what we like to hear, Professor. Confidence levels have gone up in the Professor parlay, getting up now.
Hopefully, Paul, we don't succumb to last leg.
Don't jinx it.
No, I'm not going to jinx it. All right, 5:10 p.m. game. North Melbourne playing the Fremantle Dockers in North Hobart of all places. So hopefully they'll get a good crowd down there.
Definitely. Freo especially have been, and I've already said it too many times, great form is going to be my favourite phrase for this episode. I think Freo will be able to come out on top. North, again, it's going to be a really good game. There's a few really good games so far this round, and so far that we've spoken about today, just Sunday. Freo, I think it's going to be all about the Dockers today.
Okay.
Well, you've tipped a $2.40 pop in the Dogs, $2.10 in the Dockers, so you've got some outsiders about you.
Thank you. No, I do like looking at the odds every once in a while and seeing what they think, but I like also just going on the back of what I think as well and hoping that I can come on top of it.
Gelding looks at more screens than a stockbroker. Don't worry about you like the odds.
All right. Thanks very much for that, Sarah. Much appreciated. Now, Gelding.
No problem.
Cricket Australia versus Justin Langer, 15-round knockout bout. Justin Langer has retired hurt on a TKO.
Oh dear, Professor. One of your favourite sayings is "old dear," but is this just the body? Look at the Cricket Australia. Cricket's been successful for 6 years and they ended up almost bankrupt, Professor. Now they've got a successful coach, and they decide to offer him a minor contract so he doesn't take it up. And we're hearing countries around the world will be lining up for him to take positions with them. Why would a body that has a successful coach want to move him on, Professor?
Because the players didn't like being worked so hard. And can I ask that word transition must have been used 8 times in that very bumbled statement. Transition from what? I just won the Ashes. We won the 2020. At what odds was that paying pre-tournament? What are we transitioning from and why? Down from the mountain, are we? No, but air's getting a bit thin. We're going to transition down from the top of the mountain.
Paul, I won't be. I'll read some things, some quotes from papers that people have made. It's not bagging New South Wales or anything like that. It's just what's.
Oh, you're not going to turn this into a New South Wales
No.
thing,
I'm just going to read.
Give me strength.
I'm just going to give you the quotes. And look, the players seem to have a lot of clout in all this, and
Yes.
none of them have come out in support of Langer, especially the captain, who would have put this all to bed by just saying we're happy with Justin Langer and the way he's going. What is quoted in the paper, and it just reads, "This mess has left plenty shaking their heads." So the players who were responsible for the degradation of Australian cricket are now the ones calling the shots. A source in Australian cricket told News Corp. I can say that only probably refers to the people involved in Sandgate that are currently in the Australian side and in the support of that. So, what I was going to comment on, why the players that have managed to muck up Australia cricket have so much say. It then goes on to say, Paul, other sources have pointed the finger at a supposed New South Wales cricket mafia. Ricky Ponting's quoted, Cricket Australia handling of Tim Payne and Langer's departures as poor as embarrassing. And when he was playing, never did the players have a say in who Cricket Australia was going to appoint. Further on, it goes to say, talks about Bayliss, who was one of Trevor Bayliss, who was coach of England. Goes on to say, Bayliss is without an IPL deal, and Cricket Australia power brokers wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't approach the man England hired to revolution its white ball program. Given the quality of his CV, the fact Bayliss is from New South Wales shouldn't work against him. Now, that's just quotes from papers that are taken from there. Cricket Australia are just embarrassing themselves there. The quality of people who could replace him in Andrew McDonald, Trevor Bayliss and Michael Duvanucci will all be fantastic coaches in their own right. But they're going to have this storm cloud of if you're not a player's coach, you will be rebelled against and Cricket Australia will move you on. So I think the players that have a bit of blood on their hands because of that, and some of those players have put Australian cricket in the worst light over recent years. So I just say, look, it'll move on. We have a very good side at the moment, especially the bowling side. These coaches who they appoint will be very, very good. But Australian cricket is losing something by Justin Langer moving on.
This player power concept reminds me of once when Michael Clark was dating Lara Bingle, and he said to Michael Hussey, "Can you hurry up and sing the team song?" Which is a lack of respect for the song because it's sung at the end of the night, all because Clarkey wanted to go and visit Ms. Bingle. And Simon Kadich picked him up like Darth Vader and said words to the effect of, "He'll sing it when he's ready." Because just a lack of respect, just because your girlfriend's waiting doesn't mean we're going to rush Michael Hussey's last test at the SCG for you to take off. So this player power has gone too far. And Pat Cummins, I knew when everyone was going on about what a clean skin he is, and he could have done a lot better and he should have shown respect to the man who's rescued Australian cricket and taken them, as I said, to the pinnacle of the mountain. But yeah, he used the past tense. And I noticed that he kept using the past tense. I've enjoyed working with, and no comment about I'd like to keep working with. And it's reminiscent of the Rabbitohs premiership when we broke our drought. Michael Maguire apparently is a similar type, very intense. You just have to watch that documentary to see how many F-bombs. That shouldn't bother a professional sportsman, but it's more about the intensity of the training, which I think some players don't like having to work that hard, being show ponies, some of them. So that's where I think the downfall, if you work players too hard, which of course is the reason for your success, you then can lose the playing group. And as you can see now, you lose the playing group, you lose your job.
Yep. And can I say on that, I believe Australia needs a coach. However, you have had very high-profile cricketers in the past of Ian Chappell and Shane Warne. Shane Warne was so critical of John Buchanan, it was a farce. But they say they don't need a coach.
Yeah. Now,
is that just players thinking they're so much better than everyone else? Really? Like the whole idea of, Chappell talks about an era in the 60s and the 70s, and he tries to put that in today's cricket model. Warne just thought he didn't need anyone, didn't he? He was just the best, and it did prove to be that way. And I'm sure a coach couldn't really improve him that much. But look, I think Australia needs a cricket. But what's coming out, what I read into this, is the Australian cricket players don't really rate him, and don't want him. Why? Because he's intense and puts them under pressure. Well, let's not hope the little precious things, when it finally comes to roost and everything's not going their way, how they react then. That'll be the sign.
Well, it's so reminiscent again with the Rabbitohs. We won the premiership, and then because we've just won the premiership, the players are saying, well, we're not going to do a 6 a.m. bike ride on a Sunday in summer. You do have to keep doing the bike rides because that's how you'll stay at the top. You don't get a break because you've just won the flag. You can have a little bit of time off, but if you want to keep high standards, you need a Langer type there. Because if you let these show ponies it's very similar, no doubt, as well. Our very own Gordon Tallis, when asked about the Queensland State of Origin team, it isn't hard to show Thurston how to throw a pass or tell Billy Slater how to run, but it's keeping that team together, talking certain egos down, pumping certain players up. That's the benefit of the coach, and I'm sure that Langer does a lot more than what these players give him credit for, who think that they are above reproach or coaching.
Yeah. Probably just a question for the whole panel. When I read the article on it and things like that says, so the players who were responsible for the degradation of Australian cricket are now the ones calling the shots. I read that, and I'd be quite interested in getting your views on it. Do people read that as the people that toured South Africa with Sandgate was there?
Well, I thought when I read Faceless Men, I thought you'd put them all in a New South Wales cap. You can't see the face.
No, that was the next comment. Well, and a lot of those Faceless Men aren't from New South Wales.
I don't know who the others are. They're faceless.
I don't know.
Gelding,
any question? No comments from anyone?
Well, Gelding, I've got a question for you, which is, I think, probably at the heart of it all. Given how successful Lang has been, what else could he have done except win?
I don't know. With a coaching record like that, if the English Cricket Board's not looking at him, if the Indian Cricket Board's not looking at him, if the Pakistani Cricket Board or Sri Lankan Cricket Boards aren't looking at him, wow.
Well, the mail is he won't go to England because they want to coach for each of the separate formats, and that's not his go. He wants to do all of it. But if he perhaps was just wanting to be a test match coach, which would possibly pay a third of his preferred wage, then I'm sure the English test team would love him.
Yeah, I suppose the English question is that it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, as we know, if you're successful in England, your high is way up here. But if you're not successful, those English papers can be very, very, very harsh on someone. And to have someone, like as we said, Trevor Bayliss was coached, when England won the 50 over tournament, and now he's gone. So I think they like their own English, but whether Langer wants a job like that, who knows? But I'm sure he won't be. You'd like to be managing him at the moment, I think, because he won't be short on phone calls. I suppose it'll be whether he wants to leave Australia.
And I think part of the pressure too on anyone from WA is you haven't seen your family since September. That would take its mental toll on anyone.
Oh, look, I'm sure he's a hard man. He played cricket, that's the way he's been, the way he played cricket and that, and he might be hard on them, and that may be the revolver without knowing. Who knows, but he has got the results, as Professor said. I don't think you could get a more impressive CV if you're looking to coach cricket somewhere than Justin Langer.
These players could spend some time under Craig Bellamy at the Storm if they want to see what tough training is all about.
Yeah. But look, the three candidates, I'll also say, Australia are in a very lucky position that we have quality people that can fulfill that role. But, I don't know, Professor. I would have thought he was entitled to another 4-year contract.
Well, Gelding, the last thing I want to say about it is he took over just after Sandpaper Gate, and you were talking about that earlier. At that stage, Australian cricket, the reputation was in the rubbish tin. Who else would have wanted to take over at that stage? And look how cricket has been transformed in this country, and our reputation has been re-established, all under his watch. Yet that's only good enough to get a 6-month extension to your contract. No wonder he said no.
Exactly, and I've heard Darren Lehman talk about where he was the previous coach under when this happened and all that. And again, it was, as he said, he wasn't aware of it and all that, and he had to look after the players. The players got themselves into that trouble, and then thought they were bigger than anyone and thought they would do something. Got themselves into trouble Darren Lehman said the last bit of his tenure was trying to protect these players from themselves. And then you have Justin Langer coming in, putting the focus back onto cricket without probably some players that would have played in the Australian team. And he's made them into a very successful unit. And the response for that is, we don't like you, move on.
Yeah.
Does it show how weak the officials at Cricket Australia are by not standing up to the players? Who knows?
Probably
Protecting the players from themselves sounds like coaching Collingwood.
Probably says something about it, Gelding. All right, Gelding, let's finish off the show with your red hot tips for today's Bendigo and Ararat meetings. What do you like today?
Well, the red hot tips Adelaide in the women's football, Professor. So the very successful Professor's parlay gets up. And let me say, when Sarah picked them, my confidence levels did go up considerably. But she's got a fantastic record in tipping. So that'll be the bet of the day, Professor.
They're $1.09, Gelding. That's Daniel Edot.
Yeah. Yes, definitely Adelaide. Professor, we'll go to Ararat races today, maybe two specials. Race 4, number 6, Free Flying Star. And we'll have Free Flying Star in the race 5, number 6, Paper Dragon. We'll have a look at Bendigo, just a couple, Professor. First one in race 3. Race 3, number 7, Diva Ring. Into race 5, number 2, probably the one of Giraffe Sayings, Who's Your Pappy? Eustace and Ma and Coffee. And then into race 7, number 13, Golf of Ardeen, Chris Waller and Craig Williams. So hopefully that and Adelaide get across the line, Professor, and we have a good day.
Well, you had a couple in Ararat too, didn't you, Gelding?
I've done Ararat firstly, Professor.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That was race 4, number 6, and race 5, number 6.
No, that's all right, Gelding. I was writing them down. So that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
There's one in the first at Ararat for Justin Langer, Sword of War. That could kick things off.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thanks for your participation today. Before we go, just want to mention a couple of things. Number one, if you've liked today's program, please subscribe to Sportsfan Radio on YouTube. Like the show and also forward it so that your friends can see it. And another announcement, Sportsfan Radio podcast up on Spotify and Apple. So those interviews will be able to be heard by even more people whilst they're travelling around. They won't have to look at the screen. So that's good for us. So thank you, lady and gentlemen, and we'll talk sport again